Hello and welcome to our special coverage of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. I am Ladi Akiri. The headlines. Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky visits the front lines, says Ukraine will respond to Russia's latest attacks. Britain's Prince William makes a surprise visit to troops near the Ukrainian-Polish border. And Russian Deputy Foreign Minister Sergei Ryabkov says risk of nuclear conflict at the highest level in decades. Russia swarmed cities with drone attacks overnight yesterday in a display of force as President Vladimir Putin bid farewell to his visiting Chinese counterpart Xi Jinping. On a college compound in Rishkiv, south of Kiev, at least 6 people were killed, 18 injured, and 3 still missing after drones struck 2 college dormitories. Officials say some college students and dormitory workers are still missing, and rescue efforts continue. Meanwhile, in a hospital nearby Oberkiv, some victims of the Russian drone attack recount their experiences. The hospital saw an influx of patients, and some with severe burns. Alexander Shelest, a teacher at one of the colleges, said, quote, "I felt the temperature of my body going up so much that I was about to start burning. For a fraction of a second, I wished that the concrete slab above falls down on me to stop me from burning alive." Local resident Victoria said she heard 3 explosions and drones flying at about 2 a.m. this morning. Sirens blared across the capital during the night and swathes of northern Ukraine, and the military said it had shot down 16 of 21 Iranian-made Shahid suicide drones. And Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has visited the eastern front line, meeting with troops and giving awards to servicemen. In his usual nightly address, the president said that it is painful to look at the cities in the Donetsk region to which Russia has brought such terrible suffering, adding that Ukraine will respond to these attacks. Ukrainian forces have held out for about 8 months in Bakhmut, despite taking heavy casualties in one of the bloodiest battles since Russia's full-scale invasion 13 months ago.
Today I've been working in the regions all day. Donbass, the front line, our soldiers, the region, then Kharkiv region. The situation in Kharkiv on the border, in all districts of the region, recovery, defense of critical infrastructure. I started from the front, from the Bakhmut region. It is an honor for me to support our soldiers who are defending the country in the toughest frontline conditions. I presented state awards, thanked our soldiers for their bravery, for their resilience for Ukraine, which we are protecting thanks to such heroes, thanks to each and everyone who is fighting against the Russian evil. It is painful to look at the cities of Donbass, to which Russia has brought such terrible suffering, the ruin, the almost constant hourly air raid siren in Kramatorsk, the constant threat of shelling, the constant threat to life. It is there in Donbass and Kharkiv region, wherever the Russian evil has come, that it is obvious that a terrorist state cannot be stopped by anything else but our victory. And we will ensure it, the Ukrainian victory. In all areas of the east of our country, where there's a Ukrainian flag, there is hope. You can feel it. We will do everything we can to ensure that the blue and yellow colors continue their liberation movement to return normal life to our entire land. From Donetsk to the border, we will definitely respond to the occupier for every attack on our cities. Today's Russian strikes on Zaporizhzhia, the night attack on Kyiv region, all Russian attacks will get a military, political, and legal response.
In another development, the World Bank has said Ukraine's reconstruction and recovery needs have grown to $411 billion. The assessment, made jointly by Ukraine's government, the World Bank, the European Commission, and the United Nations, is an increase from the $300 and $49 billion estimated in a report released in September. The latest evaluation expects Kiev to require $14 billion for critical and priority reconstruction and recovery investments in 2023. The country's Prime Minister, Denis Shmyhal, said in a statement that energy infrastructure, housing, critical infrastructure, economy, and humanitarian demining are the 5 priorities for this year, adding that part of the reconstruction work had already been done. But Mr. Shmyhal warned that the amount of damage and recovery needs currently does not include data on the loss of infrastructure, housing, and businesses in the occupied territories. The report said that estimates should be considered as minimums, as needs will continue to rise as long as the war continues. And Russia's defense ministry released video footage that shows Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu presenting medals to 2 Air Force pilots who intercepted a U.S. drone near the airspace around Russia's military campaign in Ukraine. The U.S. drone crashed into the Black Sea on March the 14th after being intercepted by Russian jets in the first known direct military encounter between Russia and the United States since Russia invaded Ukraine a year ago. Announcing the awards, the ministry had repeated Russia's version of events disputed by Washington, that the Russian planes did not make physical contact with the drone. The U.S. military had said the Russian fighter planes approached its MQ-9 Reaper drone during a reconnaissance mission over the Black Sea in international airspace. It said the fighters harassed the drone and sprayed fuel on it in an encounter lasting 30 to 40 minutes before one clipped the drone's propeller, causing it to crash into the sea. Meanwhile, Russian Deputy Foreign Minister Sergei Ryabkov says that the risk of a nuclear clash was at its highest level in decades, warning that Moscow was in a de facto open conflict with Washington over the war in Ukraine. Relations between Russia and the United States, long strained, have worsened even further since Russia's invasion of the country last year. In February, Moscow pulled out of the New START nuclear arms reduction treaty with Washington. Speaking at an event entitled A World Without START, What's Next?, Mr. Ryabkov said there was no question of Russia restoring the treaty for now, criticizing what he called Washington's hostile course towards Moscow.
Absolutely unprecedented degree of the U.S. hostility towards Russia, the cause of a reckless escalation of the conflict in Ukraine, waging of a total and even more sophisticated in its forms of the hybrid war against Russia, have completely changed for us the entire situation in the security. Yes, of course, Ukraine and what is going on over there is the most blatant manifestation of the escalatory anti-Russian course adopted by Washington as of today. But this country performs hostile actions against us practically in all spheres. They keep playing with fire in the full sense of the word. Given the present situation, it is totally out of question any secret or open, direct or closed, any sort of deals regarding restoration, in quotation marks, of anything related to New START treaty. I am rather reluctant to plunge into a discussion about how high a probability of a nuclear conflict is at present. But, in any case, it is higher today of anything we have had during the last few decades. Let me put it this way. I do not think that now there are any grounds to carry on any discussions with the USA on the issue related to New START treaty. I mean, we cannot carry on with business as before, and this before refers to anything prior to the period when we have found ourselves in the state of de facto open conflicts with the U.S.
And the White House National Security Spokesperson John Kirby says that he believes attacks on the Nord Stream pipelines were acts of sabotage. The Nord Stream 1 and 2 pipelines connecting Russia and Germany under the Baltic Sea were hit by a series of unexplained explosions last September. Moscow called it an act of international terrorism. The United States strongly denies any involvement in the blasts. Denmark, Germany, and Sweden have conducted their own investigations into the blasts, but no results yet. Swedish and other European investigators say the attacks were carried out on purpose, but they have not said who they think was responsible.
national investigations being done into the Nord Stream 2 explosion by 3 of our allies. We are not going to get ahead of that. That work is still ongoing. We still do believe it was an act of sabotage. The United States was not involved in any way, contrary to some press reporting out there. But we need to let the work of these investigators go on, and it needs to go on unimpeded and without any influence or pressure from anybody else. And we're going to continue to monitor the situation as it develops. Remember, you got 3. You keep saying it. There's 3, and each of them are being conducted independently by 3 different nations, and I think we need to let them finish their work. I don't know of any timeline. You'd have to go to their national investigative bodies to find out.
Admiral John Kirby, White House National Security Spokesperson. And Britain's Prince William made an unannounced trip to Poland to thank British and Polish troops involved in providing support to Ukraine before meeting refugees who have fled the conflict with Russia to hear of their experiences. The heir to the throne traveled to Wrocław in southeast Poland, where he was to meet the country's defense minister, Mariusz Błaszczak, and speak to members of the Polish Defense Force and British troops based there. The British deployment in Poland is part of a NATO buildup of strength on its eastern flank following Russia's invasion of Ukraine.
I just want to come here in person to say thank you for all that you're doing, keeping everyone safe out here and keeping an eye on what's going on. So just a big thank you for what you do on a day-to-day basis. And I know some of you are coming to the end of your time out here, so looking forward to a bit of R&R when you get home. But you're doing a really important job out here, and defending our freedoms is really important, and everyone back home thoroughly supports you. And everything you're doing with the Poles and our Polish counterparts in providing that safety is really important. So thank you for your time. Lovely to meet you all, and good luck.
And as we've been reporting, the Prince played ping pong and spoke with Ukrainian refugee children as well. Prince William sat down with them while they were staying at an accommodation center in Warsaw and listened to stories of how they fled the conflict with Russia. The accommodation block was once an office space, which was converted to house about 300 Ukrainian women and children who have fled the war. The royal trip, which had not been publicized in advance, is taking place under tight security. But his spokesperson said Prince William was very keen it went ahead and that it was something he had requested. And back in Britain, the former Prime Minister Boris Johnson admitted he misled lawmakers but claimed he did so unintentionally as he fought to save his political career at a tense and combative hearing into the Partygate scandal that contributed to the collapse of his government. Mr. Johnson, flagged by lawyers in a packed committee room, sparred with lawmakers during a heated 3-hour grilling at the hands of members of Parliament on the Privileges Committee. He was rebuffed by members of the panel, whose televised interrogation of him is a major spectacle of a months-long investigation that could end the former Prime Minister's political future. Accepting that social distancing measures were broken, Mr. Johnson argued it would have been impossible to have a drill sergeant measuring the distance between us all hours of day and night. He defended his presence at leaving drinks for staffers, insisting that such events were necessary even at a time when many Britons couldn't visit their loved ones in hospital and as COVID-19 killed hundreds of people per day. Let's talk now to Tony Ambrose, researcher, senior lecturer, Anglo-Ruskin University in the British capital, London. Good morning to you, Dr. Ambrose. Thank you for your time, as always.
Good morning, Ladi. And how is Lagos?
Well, Lagos is, as you would expect, Lagos is slightly chaotic, but we're getting on with it. Let's start off with this Partygate issue, which gripped London and Britain yesterday. It was an unusual spectacle to see a prime minister, former prime minister, being grilled on national television by his colleagues of mostly the same party over an issue that perhaps some would say, you know, is now really mute, is irrelevant because he's no longer in office. What did you make of it?
Yeah, thank you, Ladi. In fact, I was coming back from work yesterday. I was watching the grilling of former Prime Minister Boris Johnson, the British Parliament, facing the Privilege Committee. And I was just smiling and I was happy. That is the beauty of democracy, where leaders are accountable, to the people they lead. And it just goes to show how the British remain the bastion of democracy in the world. To see a former prime minister for over 3 hours yesterday, it was being briefed. And for UK citizens, that is what we are happy about. And everybody love the scene, and everyone is taking an example on how to be accountable to the people you are leading. And it's not just a case of making one rule for a group of people and another set of rules for the others, for the citizens of the country. So it was really good. And to be honest, Boris Johnson, he did give his best shot. He's a very articulate, person. He was trying to defend himself. And he stands the risk of even being recalled from the parliament. And that may just be the end of his political career, like you alluded to.
Yeah, now let's go to the other issues that are related one way or the other, because Boris Johnson was the person who started Britain's robust support for Ukraine following the invasion by Russia. But then, I mean, he made 2 trips to Kiev to visit with President Zelensky. Of course, by the time President Zelensky was to come to London, he was no longer prime minister. But then Mr. Zelensky made a point of making sure he saw him. Now, Prince William, the heir to the throne, has gone not to Ukraine, but to the border between Ukraine and Poland to meet with refugees and British soldiers who are in Poland. Is that, raising the stakes, do you think, of British involvement in this war, now that the royals, it's no longer a political thing, the royals are now involved themselves?
Absolutely. It does raise the stakes, and Prince William, the heir to the British throne, seeing him on global television yesterday, news report, this kind of visit is good for the optics, and is kind of an inspiration even to the Ukrainian soldiers and friends and allies of Ukraine, to see that not just the British government, even the British monarchy is very, very much in support of what is going on. So that visit yesterday, for me, diplomatically, it will say that it carries a lot of weight, and I believe it will also further send a message to the aggressors, that is talking about Russia now, that British support, British government support for the Ukrainian cause is not going to wane very soon. If I was looking at some, some analysis yesterday, and I found that since this crisis began in February 2022, the UK government has spent more than $23.9 billion by way of assistance, to Ukraine already. So that is a massive amount of resources that the UK government, second only to the United States, who have given assistance of about $29 billion to Ukraine. So it was very good for the optics, and I believe that Prince William, that visit is just a reflection of the support that the UK government and UK citizens are giving to Ukraine.
Let's look at the other side, of course, where you mentioned the Russians, and one wants to find out, were you surprised by the statement coming from the Russian Deputy Defense Minister, Mr. Rybkov, where he talked about the risk of nuclear confrontation, being the closest it had been in decades, and he gave 2 reasons. The first was, that Russia has pulled out of the START treaty, the new START treaty, at least for the moment. And then secondly, that incident that happened involving the drone and the Russian fighter jets. We also saw the Russian defense minister giving medals of honor to the pilots that flew the jets that intercepted that drone. Do you think, possibility that this nuclear confrontation is close? And if so, if the U.S. does get involved in any kind of confrontation with Russia, the British are going to be pulled in, no doubt, because where America goes, Britain goes.
You are very correct, spot on, Ladi. The truth of the matter is that the risk of this confrontation going nuclear is very, very high at the moment. You know, just last week, the United Britain did supply some military hardware and accessories to Ukraine, and some of these accessories contain depleted uranium, referred to as DU. So that actually is what is making the Russians apprehensive at this time, because being radioactive materials, the Russians have said that once Ukraine gets these equipment and accessories, they may likely use it. These accessories, by their nature, they can penetrate armored vehicles and armored cars and can do a lot of damage. It's got radioactive power as well. So these are some of the fears that Russians are having, and rightly so. So, but we just hope, the humanity side of us just hope that nuclear artillery and nuclear materials are not used for conflict. So the Russians are very, very correct to say that the risk of a nuclear war happening, is at its highest peak in the last 10 years. So we like analysts as we are just watching and hoping that the Americans don't come in, and like you said, the UK is not dragged in. Then an all-out nuclear crisis will now happen. So we hope it doesn't get there.
Let's look at the background to all of this as well, Dr. Ambrose. The UK, Australia, and the US, I believe it was maybe 2 weeks ago now, signed the AUKUS Pact, which also involves nuclear-powered submarines, which Australia will get, either using British technology to be built by the Americans or using American technology to be built by the British. But that would make Australia the 7th country in the world that had access to these kinds of weapons. I'm talking about nuclear-powered submarines. The UK is involved in that as well, along with the United States. And all of this, is also part of the bigger picture of containing Russia and China, who, by the way, had a meeting between Monday and yesterday. The Chinese president left for home yesterday. What do you make of all of this in the mix? I mean, the meeting between Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin on one hand, and then this AUKUS Pact.
Yeah, I think when you look at the global order now, first of all, I just want to say that there is a scare in the Committee of Nations. Should Russia win this war, then there's also a possibility that China may also annex Taiwan. So there is that geopolitical arrangement. NATO, the US, the West, they are really scared of. So that is on one side. Then on the flip side, the alignment you talked about between Australia, Canada, the US, the UK, is a military shielding. So everybody wants to get prepared because, look, to be honest, nobody expected that in 2022, 2023, a sovereign nation will be attacked, and aggressively, being destroyed like we are having now. Nobody expected that this will happen. But we've gone past the days of empires and domains when kings and emperors will just go and attack another land. So when you look at the background you gave, Australia joining the League of this nuclear acquisition and all that, I think it's just to prepare for the rainy day. And it is very much in their right to do so. Now, coming back to China, the Chinese president has spent the last 3 days, he just left for home yesterday, in Moscow. You know, it was a show of friendship and support, even though China is trying to say that they are neutral in this war, but they are not really, neutral. You will recall that on the 24th of February, on the first anniversary of this war, China did release a 12-point peace plan, which the West and Ukraine rejected. Although 5 of the plans were okay, but the other 7 were just wishy-washy. So they rejected it because that plan, the framework of that plan is that Russia annexes the territory that it currently occupies in Ukraine, which that does not augur well with Ukraine and the West at all. So when you see all this, the Russians and the Chinese, they are trying to, they just want to be disruptors. They believe that the Americans and the West, have been, reigning and running the show. So they want, to come together. You can see the friendship, very organic between President Xi Jinping and analysts have said they've met over 40 times since both of them came to power. So they have that friendship within them, and their alliance at the moment is very strong.
Indeed. Dr. Agbons, as always, thank you for the perspective, interesting views. Thank you, and do have a pleasant day ahead.
And you too, Ladi. Have a great day.
And after the break, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky takes a break at a gas station on his way back from the Eastern front lines. Find out what he did during that break. Stay on with us.
Борьбы производства США. В районе населенного пункта Полиевка, Одесса.
Thanks for staying tuned. Welcome back. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky drank coffee and took selfies at a gas station in eastern Ukraine after visiting a brigade at the front line. Ukraine's presidential office published footage showing Mr. Zelensky paying for his hot beverage at the gas station. He took selfies and posed for pictures with soldiers and civilians alike. It comes as the president handed out medals to soldiers near the front line and also appeared on video visiting and awarding wounded servicemen at a hospital. And the Norwegian Armed Forces has announced that 8 German-made Leopard 2 battle tanks, which Norway pledged to Ukraine, have now been received by Kiev. Footage released by the Norwegian military shows a Leopard 2A4 tank being transported by road to an undisclosed location on an undisclosed date before being loaded onto an Antonov transport plane along with munitions and an armored support vehicle. The tanks were promised in late January along with 4 special purpose tanks from its armored engineering and brigade layer category based on what Ukraine said it needed the most. Kiev has secured from several of its Western allies pledges to send modern battlefield tanks to help fend off Russia's invasion as Moscow steps up its efforts to make advances in eastern Ukraine. Meanwhile, the president of the Czech Republic, Petr Pavel, expects Western support for Ukraine to decline over time. Mr. Pavel said if support from the USA dwindles, support from a number of European countries will also dwindle. Ukraine must take that into account. Mr. Pavel, who is a former NATO general, says the results of the presidential election in the United States next year will affect European support for Ukraine, and Kiev must recognize that this year is decisive. Elsewhere, Sweden's parliament has formally approved a bill to allow the country to join NATO when its application had been ratified by all 30 members of the alliance, a process where it remains waiting on the final endorsements. Sweden and its neighbor Finland have asked to join the transatlantic military alliance last year in response to Russia's invasion of Ukraine, but the process has been held up by Turkey, which along with Hungary has yet to ratify the memberships. The bill was passed as expected with an overwhelming majority, 296 in favor and 37 votes against, with a small left party and the Greens the only parties opposing the proposal. If Sweden is accepted into the alliance, it will end 2 centuries of military non-alignment for the country. And China is trying to put some action into a peace plan, and that's according to Henry Wang, a scholar from the Center for China and Globalization, regarding President Xi Jinping's visit to Russia. The Chinese president met the Russian leader in Moscow on Monday, seeking to both deepen economic ties with an ally he sees as a useful counterweight to the West, and to promote Beijing's role as a potential peacemaker in Ukraine. Mr. Xi and Mr. Putin emerged from 2 days of talks with warm words of friendship between China and Russia and joint criticism of the West, but no sign of a diplomatic breakthrough over Ukraine.
One of the key purposes of President Xi's visit is really to find out, as the foreign ministry spokesperson said, it's a peace mission, trying to find out what is the thinking that Russia has, and China has just not too long ago, proposed the 12-point of a peace plan. And also before President Xi's visit, China Foreign Minister Qin Gang actually phoned and talked to the Ukraine Foreign Minister. So I think China is trying to, put some action into this peace plan and talk to both sides. Certainly, President Xi's visit to Putin, I really regard that as very timely, and also find out what Russians are thinking. And but at the same time, trying to also put the two countries' relation on a more stable. I don't think they are saying that again this time. That was, a year ago, when the war before the war broke out, when they had. But China is saying that many countries, our friendship is unlimited, our cooperation is boundless, everlasting or unlimited, or sky's the limit. So that's China says that all the time to many countries. It's not just Russians singled out to say that. So, which is in a way, but China also said, the relationship with Russia is there's no alliance, first of all. Second, is not aimed at any third parties. And thirdly, they don't want to see a conflict, anywhere else. So that's very clear. So that's just a matter of between China and Russia in a normal neighbor cooperation.
Let's talk now to Dr. Thomas, Professor of International Relations at the Lagos State University. He's also founding member of the Association of Foreign Relations Professionals of Nigeria. He joins us virtually. Good morning to you, Prof. As always, thank you for your time.
Yeah, good morning, laddie. Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Yes, indeed. The picture we just saw before we came to you, that of smiling President Putin and smiling President Xi Jinping, sends shivers down the spine of the Western allies, particularly the United States, because it had warned against what has just happened, a deepening of ties between Russia and China. Do you perhaps think that, this meeting that took place early this week, from Monday to Wednesday, marks a turning point in international global dynamics, perhaps?
Well, there is no international global dynamics about everything about this. It's all about psychology of war. When you are involved, particularly a superpower that is almost being ostracized or isolated in the Committee of Nations. So it's also about psychology of war.
Which one of the my apologies, which one of the superpowers is being ostracized? Is that Russia or China?
Russia, definitely, okay. Russia. If about 40 plus, or maybe, if about 40 plus, and US, 40 plus European nations and the United States are imposing heavy sanctions on you, and they are trying to even try to strain some relations. They are trying not to have anything to do with you. And then you are being slammed with a warrant arrest for international crime, for war crime by the ICC. That's almost kind of being isolated. And as such, under this circumstance, you need a nation, another superpower like China, to boost your morale and to also boost your ego. because it's all about, like I said, psychology of war. So he was happy. He was happy that at the time Xi Jinping was visiting, it was at the time that he was almost being cut off from the from the Committee of Nations. And as such, it was a boost, or it was a great boost for him morally in the ongoing war. However, that be that as it may, it still does not remove the fact that he has been slammed with a warrant arrest. How it's going to be enforced is a different thing,
Yeah, because that was going to be my next question. The ICC had slammed the warrant of arrest on Omar el-Bashir of Sudan. And for years, Omar el-Bashir traveled to various parts of the world, and he was not arrested. How much more now we're talking about the president of Russia? How is it going to be executed? Can it be executed? I mean, is this the kind of thing that can happen?
Exigencies and circumstances are unpredictable when it comes to international system or international politics. If Omar Bashir was not arrested for years, so nobody should expect Putin to be arrested immediately. But sometimes some of these warrants are just being done for the purpose of moral suasion, or against some of the people involved. It's not necessarily that they must be effected immediately. However, the caution has to be made that for Omar Bashir, well, there is no doubt about it that he can be arrested. I mean, he has even been this whole thing has encumbered him in terms of his movement, in terms of everything. And then the same thing will happen to Putin. The second day, the following day when the warrant was issued, he had a kind of parade to Crimea, just to show that he was, he was up to the task and that there was nothing that would happen. However, reported that he was heckled. So some of these things may not be executed immediately or enforced immediately. And no nations, don't forget that even US is not a member of ICC. It's not a signatory to ICC. So it's going to be very difficult to enforce. However, like I said, anything can happen. There may be a kind of insurgency. There may be a kind of insurrection. There may be any kind of coup, even within the Kremlin. And as such, it will definitely be answerable. What is important is that there is already a stamp of criminality on Putin, and is going to face charges. So that's charge one. And don't forget, there is also Bucha there. There is also the Bucha massacre. A lot of war crimes that will still be slammed against him for all these things. So for as long as he remains the leader of Russia, the president of Russia, is going to enjoy a kind of psychological immunity, a kind of physical, immunity, because nobody wants to go and enforce that kind of thing, knowing that this is a nation with nuclear capability. So it's going to be very difficult to enforce, but definitely to be enforced at a particular point in time, as the situation goes on.
Russia and China, part of what came out of their meeting, or well, even ahead of the meeting, was that China had a peace proposal consisting of 12 elements, which it had proposed to the UN, to Turkey, the United States, and then which President Xi took along to Russia during his visit. During that visit, President Putin said, well, they had looked at the proposal. It was, the basis on which any, some kind of talks could begin, even though they didn't agree with everything. But as you pointed out, the West was not very enthusiastic about it. In fact, in some instances, it was dismissed completely out of hand because China was not regarded as impartial. But do you think that perhaps if you have seen that proposal, if it is in any way the kind of thing that could be talked about, what sometimes in diplomacy they refer to as talks about talks?
Well, I personally, immediately I saw the peace plan, I dismissed it. Any peace plan that does not involve or that does not include immediate withdrawal of immediate withdrawal of Russia from Ukrainian territory is not going to work. And then any plan, any peace plan that is not even talking about immediate cessation of hostilities is not going to work. It's not going to gel with me. In the first instance, if you're going to make any peace plan and then you want to stand, you don't even know which one to stand on. Are you standing on the status quo ante, or you are even standing on the status quo ante below? Are we talking of 2014? Are we talking of 2014? Are we talking of 2022, when about 4 regions too, Luhansk, Donetsk, Kherson, and Zaporizhia were also annexed? Are we talking of 2014, when Sevastopol and Crimea were also annexed? Are we talking of permanent occupation of the Donbass? So which one are we really talking about? So my own position is that there is no nation, no matter how powerful you are, that has the authority to go and encroach on another man's land, on another sovereign territory. We are talking of contemporary international politics. The only way to generate global peace and global security is for nations, irrespective of your status, irrespective of your state stature, irrespective of your nuclear capability or whatever, to respect the sovereignty of every nation. Russia should respect the sovereignty of Togo. A Russian state should also respect the sovereignty of Benin Republic. That is the way it should be. That is global peace. Because number one, there is nothing to show, no evidence to show that Ukraine carried out any kind of aggression or any kind of attack on Russia. So for as long as you don't show respect for another nation's sovereignty, there is no way to talk about peace. Peace is all about justice. Peace is all about equity. Peace is all about respect. So what peace are we talking about? What kind of peace, peaceful plan? I mean, what kind of peace plan is China coming up with? You are writing 12 peace proposals, and then at the end of the day, there is nothing to show that you are asking for immediate withdrawal of Russia. Even if you are going to, do some kind of smoke screen, you can at least say that, okay, Russia should go back to 2014 status. 2014 till now, before last year's aggression, as at 2014, nobody was even interested in attacking Russia for what it did in 2014, for the attack it carried out in Donbass and Crimea, and the annexation of Crimea. Everybody was still looking at a diplomatic way to resolve that issue. And now this aggression came. So if you oblige or indulge an aggressor with concessions, then you are going to run into trouble, because no aggressor will always be satisfied with 1 or 2, 3, 4 concessions. When do you know when it will stop? You can never tell when an aggressor will stop until when you start giving concessions, because it will always be boosted by the fact that, oh, I have done this in 2014, it worked. Let me try it in 2022, it worked. I mean, from Crimea annexation, and then you now have about four again. And then from the way it's going now, it's like the entire territory of Ukraine. That is what it wants. That's what Russia wants. So indeed, I do not see the peace plan, the Chinese peace plan working in any way. And that's why the West has already has rejected it. The Ukrainians have also rejected, and they have already sent their own peace plan to China. They are waiting for their response, which is not forthcoming. Yes.
Indeed. Professor of International Relations, Dr. Thomas, as always, thank you for your time and for your perspective this morning.
Thank you for having me.
And still to come, Ukrainian soldiers ride out the war stress with hippotherapy. Please stay on with us. Thanks for staying tuned. Ini John Mekwawa, Business Desk, joins us. Good morning, Ini.
Good morning.
100,000 Russians moved to Georgia to preserve...
Georgians moved. Yeah, Russians.
100,000 Russians moved to Georgia,
you're correct.
to preserve their middle-class lifestyle. What does that mean?
Well, it means that living in Russia had been redefined, you know, with all that has happened. Yesterday, we did talk about the banks having more restriction, you know, on, you know, the kind of currency they can send out into the Russian community. Indeed. So that means that some things were being very difficult to access. We've talked about the companies that have left Russia. So that means an average Russian or resident in Russia who used to buy burger easily and things like that had to change their taste bud. And some people just weren't ready for that kind of thing.
They weren't ready to change. They weren't ready for teaching the old dog new tricks.
It was too late. So they moved to Georgia with their money, you know. So that's how come they're preserving their middle-class status. With their money, they moved to Georgia and went there again to redefine what middle class is about. Now, Georgians are complaining because these guys came in with their money and trust business people. So they see rich guys coming into town. Rent went up 25%. Actually, that's a whole lot, a quarter. You know,
business. That's capitalism.
It's business, but you know, then you send a whole lot of people.
You price them out of the market.
Exactly. So that is what has happened in Georgia. You have the middle class, especially in the cities, the capital, Tbilisi, and then the second biggest, which is Batum. You know, they have Russians now defining what middle class means. You know, so it's now very difficult for the normal Russians who were the big guys at that time. They've now been sent down the ladder. And so that's why they're saying, why are we not even closing our borders?
Yes, to them. Well, again, these things get hideously complicated. They do get complicated. The United Kingdom has signed a digital trade deal to support Ukraine's economy. The United Kingdom.
Yeah, United Kingdom. So what they've done is to bring business people together in Ukraine to tell them, chart a new course to say, do business with Ukraine. That's the British.
Yeah, the British businesses should do business with Ukraine.
It's all in the bid of the reconstruction that they are working on. And so they've cut down tariff. In fact, tariff is mostly zero. So if Ukraine is going to import or export into Ukraine, into UK,
it's at no
tariff. So those are kind of the businesses or the moves they are taking. And remember the other time, Ukraine did come up to say, oh, people can come and buy some of those government-run or government-owned banks and land, you know, for agriculture and all of that. So that's what the UK is doing, trying to encourage their businesses, their business people to, you know, invest in Ukraine to help see how they can help the country at least reduce some of the losses, even though obviously that is huge risk because the war is still on. You know, we're still struggling to even renew the grain deal.
The grain deal, absolutely.
You know, so I mean, it's a risk, but I guess it's one.
I like this one in the sense that it talks again now about friendly and unfriendly countries. Armenia and Russia have completely stopped mutual settlements in dollars. On the other hand, Tanzania and India are able to continue trading in their own currencies.
So this is all about the dominance of dollar, which is, I mean, I think is going down. It's going down with things like this. If Armenia and Russia, you know, are no longer dealing with dollar and euro and the pound, they're now dealing with their currencies. You know, that is one thing. But, you know, it's also important to note that Armenia that would have not been anywhere close to the giants, the big countries, is now doing business with Russia. So those companies that left Russia, they're now being replaced by some Armenian companies, or those products are being exported into Russia. And Russia is paying them in the Armenian dram.
Right.
Guess what that would do to the value of the dram? It goes up. I wish Nigeria could do something like that.
Well, we might eventually get to that.
Okay.
We might eventually get to that.
Hopefully.
Hopefully. Thank you so much, Ini. It's a pleasure.
Me.
As usual, Ini will have the details of these and other stories along with her team on Business Morning and Business Incorporated. So do watch out for that. Thanks, Ini.
Thank you so much.
Let's take a quick look at our last set of stories. The Canadian Immigration Ministry says Canada is extending a support program meant to help Ukrainians and their immediate families to become temporary residents of the North American country and easily apply for work or study permits. The Canada-Ukraine Authorization for Emergency Travel Program, which was launched shortly after the start of the Russian invasion of Ukraine last February, was set to expire next week. The Immigration Ministry said that Ukrainians and their family members of any nationality will now have until July 15 to apply for a visa under the program. Anyone holding such a visa will have until March 31, 2024 to travel to Canada, and those already in the country will also be able to extend or adjust their temporary status during that time. And finally on the program, in a cozy band on the outskirts of the capital Kiev, that's in Ukraine, a group of soldiers are taking a break from battle with a session of hippotherapy using riding and contact with horses for therapeutic effect. Therapists are using other animals as well. The soldiers have to deal with the difficulties of war, but they appear childlike. The troops in small groups mount the horses and ride in circles with helpers beside them trying to relax their legs and gradually raising their arms to waist and shoulder level and then above the head. The organization called Spirit also works with children and people with disabilities. When war broke out, it began offering hippotherapy to frontline soldiers via a program called Spirit Warrior. That's our program this morning. Thanks for being with us. My name is Ladi Akiri Kadrali.